Vulnerability can feel a little risky, but isolating yourself and being lonely and feeling like you don't belong is more costly.
You are listening to My Rejection Story, hosted by Alice Draper. Welcome back to another episode of My Rejection Story. Today, I am joined by Dr. Kimberly Horn, and she is going to be talking to us about friendships, loneliness, and so much more. I am curious what your thoughts are in your research that whether this social atrophying or kind of this accelerated loneliness makes us more sensitive to rejection.
First of all, thank you for having me on today. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. And when we become more insular, more isolated, we don't have the opportunities to put our social skills into practice. And since the pandemic, I've noticed and had many people tell me that they feel like they lost skills along the way. They lost their ability and sometimes even their desire to connect with people.
And so my brain kind of goes to like, well, if we're more disconnected or lonelier than ever, does that also mean that we are more afraid of rejection than we are if we're connected to our communities? And I don't know if any of like research suggests that, but it's something that came to mind.
No, I mean, belonging is, one, it's a basic need. And two, it's biological. And as you said, it goes back to, very evolutionary time in our bodies. And when we aren't connected, when we don't belong, we feel afraid. And as you know, fear is the basis of so much of our sense of rejection.
Yeah. There's fantastic points. Yeah, the fear of being the basis of rejection. So quick introduction for listeners who don't know who Kimberly Horn is. Dr. Kimberly Horn is an internationally recognized research psychologist, professor, and public health scientist. The reason why I invited her here is because I heard about her book, Friends Matter, For Life, Harnessing the 8 Tenets of Dynamic Friendship, which is also endorsed by the best-selling author Mel Robbins and confronts the public health crisis of loneliness, exploring friendship as its antidote. In 2023, which is now 3 years ago, the US Surgeon General declared loneliness as a public health crisis, I believe. And I think friendship is one of the most underappreciated and underspoken, prioritized parts of life. And I think especially in Western societies, like having been exposed to quite a few different societies, it's very easy, it's very encouraged to prioritize nuclear family in your decision making. So you prioritize, where does my partner's job take us, or what schools should the kids go to, or whatever. And something as simple as where you live. And having been exposed to other societies, I see not everyone operates in that way. Some people prioritize, where do my friends live? Let me go live with my friends. But we need to make sure that we have a community around us where it's not just going to be us as a couple. And so I don't know. I just think that it's fascinating, and we need to talk about why prioritizing friendship is important. So to start the conversation here, Kimberly, maybe you could talk to us a bit about what the research says in terms of why we should prioritize friendship. What does it do to us health-wise when we prioritize, and what are the negative effects of not prioritizing friendships?
Yeah. So I've been studying health and health behavior for almost 30 years. And across the various health outcomes I studied in individuals and families and communities, despite a whole array of circumstances. And I spent many years studying addiction and health inequalities, across many places in the United States. And one of the factors that always rose to the top as being either a risk without having it or highly protective if it was in place was social connection. And after the pandemic, as we discussed before, I started seeing some of my findings playing out in real time, in real life, with people, suffering even more over and beyond the physical elements of COVID itself, but just, deep loneliness and mental health issues. And That is part of what spurred me to write the book, is because I didn't want to do another study that, as you probably know, like not that many people read academic papers. I have a bunch of them. Maybe 10 people read each paper. So I really didn't want to do another study. I wanted to take what I had learned over the years about the science and my own lived experience and write a book that could reach the general populations on how we navigate, how we navigate, and how we approach friendship with a skill. So, going back a little, backpedaling a little bit to your question, Alice, I think that the research now is indisputable. We know, and the Surgeon General's report in 2023 really put an exclamation point on that. We know it's indisputable that loneliness impacts our health in negative ways. And to the converse of that, social connectedness has all sorts of positive effects, on our our lowers our cortisol and raises all the good, feel good hormones, and it helps us with regulate our blood pressure and our stress and our ability to think clearly. I mean, so many, it just affects so many things in positive ways. And my bias is that friendship is one of the most powerful, accessible tools that we have to address the loneliness crisis. And it's something that's accessible to almost everyone if we can figure out the best ways to achieve it.
Yeah, yeah, it is accessible to everyone. But I think that a lot of people listening, especially those who might be afraid of potential rejection,
Mm-hmm.
would disagree. And they would be like, no, it's not accessible. It's really, really hard. And
Mm-hmm.
I understand why people think that way
Mm-hmm.
because, in many ways, I think, especially as we reach our later in life years, or not even later in
Yes.
life, but once you get out of institutions like school or university, obviously some give and take, it could vary.
Yeah.
But that really got me thinking because I was like, okay, this is interesting because I think where the challenge comes in adulthood is that it's
Mm-hmm.
very hard to have that level of interaction when you're
Yeah.
not, going to lectures every day or
Yeah.
bonding over, even if you have coworkers, but more people are remote now, at least you're bonding
Yeah.
over like tea breaks in the office. And so that shared time comes in. And
Yeah.
I wonder, yeah, what your thoughts are on that when it becomes a lot more intention to
Yeah.
form those connections, and often someone might have a coffee and then not see someone for 7 months. And so when they never really go
Yeah.
past that acquaintance phase.
Yeah. So, a couple of things. One, I'm going to go back to the point about accessibility. Accessible doesn't mean that it doesn't come without challenges, that it's not hard sometimes. So I want to make that clarification. I acknowledge, and the whole reason that I wrote the book is because it's hard. We all need a tune up sometimes. We all need skills. We all need an awareness of ourselves and where we are in different phases of life. And that's one of the main reasons that I wrote the book, is because I personally know that it can be difficult. I'm one of those people who work remotely. I'm one of those people who's moved many times. I'm one of those people who has gone through many seasons and changes of life and having to, start over and make new friends in different places and spaces. So I know that friendship is always accessible to me. It's out there, but I have to do the hard work sometimes. And I just want to acknowledge for people who may be feeling it's just really hard at this season of my life. And it is. It can be, and that's why we struggle with loneliness, because it can be difficult to put ourselves out there. And sometimes we don't know how to approach new people in our lives, especially as adults. We don't know. It's very challenging to make new friends as adults. So the time rules do vary. I think the main take home from that is that it's very important to be intentional and to put time into relationships that feel important to you, and to people that you meet that resonate, that strike a chord with you. And you think maybe this is someone that feels like I could form a connection with. And I also don't want to downplay the importance of what I call like micro connections. And those happen. See, I mean, friendship is in different buckets, right? And um, you have the people that you want to go deeper with, and then you have the people maybe you already have some depth with, and your micro connections can keep you attached to them and close to them in some way. I also think that the micro connections in your immediate surroundings, it's a neighbor you pass every day, or someone you talk to at the grocery store, or even the person who delivers your Amazon packages, or whomever those people are that you might see in your sphere. Those are important to have as to feel connected as well.
Every interaction is centered around like a let's grab a coffee or let's like carve out like an hour on a Saturday. So
Mhm.
the question I want to ask is people who are thinking like, I don't know how to actually get that time in. I don't like if we
Yeah.
spend 1 hour every Saturday, how long is it going to take until we're truly friends?
Repetition is important. I have a group of friends that I don't see very often, but we connect almost every day via our group chats. And that those women have become, incredibly important part of my daily just feeling like, someone sees me, someone knows what I'm up to. And it doesn't take much out of time out of my day. We're now almost 4 years into this friendship, and when we started connecting, we didn't know each other at all. So there's that discomfort and awkwardness when you first start meeting people. But I think that the important thing was we initially started connecting over a common interest, something that was meaningful to all of us. And then some of those time, that the time factor is built in for things that you're already doing. I mean, time poverty in relationships is a real thing. Coffee after, whatever, something that you're already doing. Maybe it's a telephone conversation while you're folding laundry. It's just,
Yeah, yeah. I like, that you touch on finding those small ways to connect, even if it's while you're folding laundry and you're jumping on a pole. And it's hard, right? Like,
Mhm.
I know that I could do that. And then I can go, if it's been months since I've spoken to a lot of my friends that don't live near me because just we bad at online communication. Um, do you have, I guess, if you're not in the habit of it and your friends
Mhm.
aren't in the habit of it either, like your friends are not in the habit of receiving a phone call from you while you're folding the laundry, it can feel really awkward to
Yes.
create those micro connections.
Mhm.
Do you have any advice on how, yeah, listeners or me or anyone could start normalizing those micro connections?
Well, one, I mean, I think it's important just to jump in and to do it. And maybe you start with that friend that the awkward bar is a little lower. Like, hey, I'm gonna call you. I'm folding laundry. I'm gonna call you while I'm folding laundry, and let's catch up. I know you're busy too. This sounds really silly and it's really awkward. I mean, just be honest. I mean, I think that's the most important thing. Is this feels really silly and awkward to me, but I really miss you and I want to catch up. My biggest chunk of time right now is when I'm folding laundry or after I put the kids to bed, or just be honest and straightforward, and start with someone that is will understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I love that. Jump into it. And I'm also thinking as you're talking that like also like a text heads up because I would be like a kind of alarmed if some of my friends just called me because we're not in the habit of it.
Right. Right.
It's just a text like, hey, I'm calling you for folding laundry. Then I know like they're not calling me because there's like some crisis
Something
happening.
wrong.
Yeah.
And that's it's funny that you say that, because I like to call people, and there was a time, especially post pandemic, where I realized that when I would call someone, it startled them. So, like you, I'd be like, yeah, hey, free for a chat. I'm gonna call you. But now I can call. They have a group of a few friends that I can call, and they aren't alarmed. It's like, oh, she's calling again. But
Yes,
it's
you're
just
them.
right, right. We're not a phone call society right now. And
Yeah.
I would like to think that we can bring that back, because one of the things that's happened with And I'm not saying that texting and online interactions don't have a place, because for some people, it is literally a lifeline. I think that when we rely completely on that sort of communication, that we lose some nuance. We lose the inflection and the tone of our voice, and I don't know about you, but I don't go as deep in my text messages as I do when I'm talking with someone. Now, the other thing that I've found really helpful, and I have a few friends who do this, and a few of them are very, very busy professional women, moms right now, and they want to like catch up, and they want, so I'll say, tell me what's going on in your life right now, and I'll get a 10 p.m. voice memo on my text thread that just it's like 5-10 minutes, whatever the cap is that people can have these conversations. And it's just like, okay, here's what's going on with me. And if you haven't heard from me lately, this is what's going on. And then it's a way for me to say, like, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. I want to be here for you. What can I do right now? But I mean, I think sometimes too, we need to just let go of things. We need to just know that someone's on the other side listening to whatever it is we want to pour into the conversation. And voice memos, I think, provide a place for that.
Yeah, yeah. I love hearing a voice note from a friend that I haven't heard from a long time.
Hmm.
But also to your
Hmm.
point, I think we should normalize phone calls again, or do what you've done, which is almost like train your friends to expect just a casual chat.
Exactly.
Because
Right.
obviously, if they're getting a bit of dopamine each time they chat to you,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
is now associated positively rather than like something
And
wrong.
yet, and you know what? Now they almost always pick up.
Yeah.
I mean, I try to call not to call it times where I know that it's they're putting the kids to bed, or that sort of thing. But um, most of the time, people pick up or they call back, and that wasn't always the case.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. Let's get back into it. I mean, I grew up doing like landline because it was free in
Well,
landlines for
if you
after
heard that 2026 is the year of year of analog, right?
we're going back. Yeah. And yeah, I feel like we're so far from that. And to your point, like texts and stuff are still part of it, but that I don't think that the feel good hormones are really there, at least not for me, if it's a quick call with my best friend versus some texts. So yeah,
I mean,
recreate.
I completely acknowledge that it's awkward sometimes, and there's a lot of vulnerability involved in that. And vulnerability can feel a little risky, but isolating yourself and being lonely and feeling like you don't belong is more costly.
Far more costly. And I think, yeah, you touched on that earlier, that the cost of being isolated. There is something that, as I was reading your book, Kimberly, had me thinking is you have these great chapters like that cover, like I guess the core, as you said, the core tenets of
The
friendship.
tenets, yes.
Um, and one of them being acceptance.
Mhm.
So that being, playing a critical role in friendship is embracing and appreciating the differences and imperfections of our friends. And something that came to mind, and something that has just generally come to mind, is whether we as a society are less accepting today than maybe we were previously. Um, because I know I have seen it, that it can be easy to kind of have hard boundaries about what we will and won't accept in friendships to the point of no longer having that friendship. Is that something that you've seen in your research or that you, yeah, have ever have any thoughts on?
I have a lot of thoughts on it. Um, I think that certainly here in the United States, I can't speak, globally, but certainly, what I witness on a daily basis in the United States um, underscores the difficulty and how far we have come from accepting other people's differences without being threatened. And, part of acceptance is, taking our friends and loving and respecting what's good about them. And also not being threatened and not being um, offended by what in them is different than than us. And I do agree with you, Alice, that I feel like acceptance is has become increasingly challenging for a lot of people. And I talk a lot about it in the book. As you said, it's one of the 8 tenets. And I think that it's important for all of us to take a look in the mirror and think about how we are embracing people around us and their whole selves and their nuances and their quirks and their differences. And I'm not talking about things that are um, compromise our values and our ethics and our morals and things like that. But I'm talking about just people being human and um, letting people into our lives and their whole selves and all the messiness that comes with that.
Yeah, yeah. It's I wonder, I mean, I would also think in mental biases, at least what I witnessed, is it's a lost skill. And I wonder if it's a skill I'm losing myself. Because if I put myself back in the time of kind of being in school or in
Mhm.
university, I found that I was a lot more accepting of
Mhm.
people, of potential friends than I am now, where, if I'm
Yeah.
meeting someone and I'm like, you know, XYZ annoys me or I didn't find them that interesting or whatever, I'd be less
Yeah.
likely to initiate something again with a new friend. But then when I look at my old friends, the friends that I've been friends with for decades, I'm like, well, we actually like don't have a lot in common. And like, there's a lot that like, if I met them now, I don't necessarily know that I would initiate a second or third hangout, but they turned out to be like lifelong, true, wonderful friends.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to diagnose, and I kind of wonder, like, is it a life thing? Does it depend where you are in your life that you become, I guess, more about yourself, so you know what you're looking for in friendships, and is that to the detriments of us?
Well, I mean, some of that's is positive. I mean, when we we get to know ourselves better, we know more of what we need in a relationship and a friendship, hopefully. And we draw tighter boundaries because our time is more limited. Because we know ourselves better, because we want to connect oftentimes in a deeper level. Um, we connect differently when we're younger, and a lot of times it's around just fun and pleasure. And as we get older, we want connections that can also help us through the harder times. The ups and downs and all the challenges that come with life. So I mean, I think it's okay to be particular and to want the people around you that meet your needs. That doesn't mean that you can't be friendly with people who don't necessarily live the same way that you do. I also think that there comes a time, and as you know, I address this in the recalibrating part of the book. There comes a time when there were friends who met certain needs when we were younger that don't really meet those needs anymore, and those friendships often fade. And that's okay too. I mean, not every friendship is intended to be with us throughout our entire lives. In fact, most don't. As you know, we turn over friends every 7 years. But when we when friendships fade or we make a choice to let a friendship fade, it doesn't mean that that friendship never served a purpose. It doesn't mean that it didn't bring gifts to your life. It doesn't mean that it wasn't important or it didn't bring you love in your life. It's just not there now. It was the friendship you had in an earlier version of yourself.
Yeah. So I read that, and it honestly, like, it brought up mixed feelings in me, the recalibrating, allowing friendships to fade. And I guess a part of my thinking around this is that I have let go friendships and felt better for it. But I also feel like, and I'm going to bring in, maybe it's a little bit left field, but I feel like in societies where it's harder to let go of friendships, so this is now kind of more communal societies and less
Yeah.
Western societies. I watched a fascinating show called The Blue Zones, which looked at like society. I mean, it's in
Saw that.
Italy and
Yeah.
yeah, Japan, and one of the core things of living past 100 is community. And what I noticed about a lot of those communities is that they are kind of connected to the community around them. That's where they born, grew up. These
Hmm.
are their cousins, neighbors, and they don't have that much choice over it, but they are still connected because they're raising their grandkids, well, helping look after their grandkids. And if you're an aunt, helping raise your nieces and nephews. Stuff. And so I do wonder, in societies like that, where there isn't as much choice to just say, hey, I don't want to be around you anymore. Um, Yet people maybe are living a bit longer or feeling a bit more connected or have a greater sense of purpose because they view their community as family, and we get through the good times and the
Hmm.
bad times, even if we don't see eye to eye. So that's where all my kind of mixed feelings lie, and I'm curious if you have
Yeah.
any thoughts there.
Yeah, no, I thought of that quite a bit. I was raised, born and raised in a small town, and a lot of my many of my friends from that same time period are still in that town. That some of my closer friends are there was a group of 4 or 5 of us, and we kind of live all over the country. And looking back at the people who are still in my hometown, and even look at my parents who've lived in that same town their whole lives, they have this incredible sense of community, and it really is amazing and beautiful to watch. So on the one hand, I have so much admiration for that, and I believe that that sense of community that they have. I mean, my mom's in her 80s now. I truly believe that that sense of community that she's had her entire life has kept her strong and healthy. And I love that for her. And I love people who have that, as like in the blue zones, of people who have that history and proximity, and they've raised each other's children, and they've been there through life and death experiences, and that is just, I mean, I think that's an amazing, beautiful testament to the importance of community and connection. I also believe that we can cultivate that on some small, in some way, not even a small way, in some significant way, when we have to go to new communities. As I mentioned before, I've been in this community now for my current community for about 4 or 5 years, and it's taken some time, but I'm slowly starting to put together, that sense of community of people that I I feel like are very important in my life now and could potentially be in my life for a very long time. So I wanted to say make one other point about recalibration, and to note that recalibration doesn't always mean that we're ending. It doesn't always mean that a friendship has to stop. Sometimes it means that we just simply have to make some adjustments in our expectations. If there's someone that I I used to hang out with, um, once or twice a month, my life is just not there right now. It's okay for you to say, I'm going to talk to this person less frequently. Or maybe I see them twice a year. But when I see them, it's really special. But I've adjusted my expectation because that friendship is not it's not like it used to be. It doesn't serve me in the same way, and I don't serve them in the same way. I'm sure of that. I mean, I've been on both sides of recalibration. I've been, I've recalibrated, and I've been, I've been left behind. So, I mean, I think we all have those sorts of experiences. So, you know, I think we can sometimes lovingly release a friendship that no longer fits who we're becoming, and sometimes that works the best for both people.
Yeah.
It's not a failure. But but like you said, I mean, I do not discount the importance of the longevity and connection. And we don't have in our modern society, because of transience and people moving around, because of increased independence, especially of women, because women have often are the keepers of those very tight communities. And when women, as when we are not there as much for that, if we're moving around, if we are more independent financially, those things change. And then that's one of the reasons why it's important for us to find connection in so many other ways.
It was the community aspect was almost built in small town, or when you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of born and raised in the same community and you don't have to think too hard about it. It's a different country, and I still have my
Yeah.
friends back in my hometown, but our lives look different, and we will maybe connect once or twice a year. So it's not the level of friendship that it
Yeah.
once was. I
And
know
in,
that.
in those communities too, we think about some of the things that have historically, conventionally brought people together around church and religion and community centers and as you said, small communities. A lot of those things have become more fractured, and I think that definitely impacts our level of connectedness.
I guess I just wanted to touch on was in recalibration. So you in your recalibration chapter, when you
Hmm.
explore kind of adjusting our the way friendships might look. I like that you kind of touch on the adjusting expectations and adjusting, I guess, the frequency that of
Yeah.
interactions you might have in some cases. And I often think that the friends that I still have from my home country exist because their expectations were low on both sides in terms of how frequently we're going to talk. And so I think that being a really important one. I think the other end is painful, and it touches on rejection, which we, the name of the podcast.
Yeah.
And I think it's a kind of disenfranchised rejection, because rejection from a spouse or partner or romantic interest in
Yeah.
whatever is very much spoken about and, normalized that's going to hurt. But friendship rejections can be devastating. And I don't think that society always acknowledges the pain of friendship rejection. I'm curious if you have thoughts, maybe your own story, and what your thoughts are on dealing with friendship rejection,
Yeah.
getting
I
that.
mean, friendship pain is a very deep, unique kind of pain. And because we're completely there by choice, and we've set our own rules and expectations, unlike in most cultures there are certain expectations around romantic love or familial bonds. I mean, we have laws and rules and scripts to follow. And when someone goes through a divorce or a spouse passes or those types of losses, society really knows how to rally around that. And people tend to know what to do. I'm not the pain is real and is known, and people kind of know what to do, how to jump in and help with that. When we have friendship loss or friendship grief, be it from someone rejecting you or you know through death, um, our society doesn't. And I speak more from in the United States. There there aren't a lot of ways that people acknowledge that kind of pain and loss. I mean, you don't have paid time off. You don't have, people bringing you casseroles and checking on you. It's just, um, it's a lonely kind of grief. So, and a lot of times when you're grieving the loss of a friend, you're not only, you know, feeling that loss, but it feels very invisible. So it's a very lonely kind of journey.
What advice would you have for anyone that is maybe currently going through some kind of friendship breakup or rejection that feels alone in their grief and isn't sure how
Yeah.
to where to get support?
Well, one, I want to acknowledge it that it's real grief and it's real pain, and it's deep and it will take time to heal, just as other losses do. Someone who's grieving is already just, it has just enough on their plate, and it's very difficult to even ask for help sometimes. But I think that it's important to let at least someone know, be it a friend or a family member, that you're experiencing deep grief at the loss of your friend, and to name that friend. And when you feel like it, to talk about that friend, to tell a story about that friend. Um, I want to make a point too to people who have friends who recently lost a friend. And that's um, my call on to those folks, is to check in, even if you didn't know the friend that someone lost, to check in and to call that person by name, and to take them dinner, or take them a cup of coffee, or take them on a walk. Do something to let them know that you acknowledge the pain that they're experiencing, even if you didn't know the person, to acknowledge that that pain is real. I mean, that's the last thing someone who's grieving, they don't want to have to make decisions about what they need sometimes. It's like the what we hear people often say, and it's done with good intention, is let me know how I can help you. Tell me what you need. Well, sometimes people can't even process what they need. But what will be helpful is to show up for them in some caring way.
Yeah, yeah. Something else that's coming to mind is that there is shame attached to a friendship rejection. And I
Yeah,
think that that's
yeah.
because friendships are lower stakes than relationships. You can have many friends and you're not agreeing to live with this person for the rest of your life. So in a case where someone is maybe too ashamed to tell anyone that they have lost a friend, or is also struggling with low self-worth and questioning their value as a human. Is there
Yeah.
any advice you have specific to that? Because it can also make it quite hard to put yourself out there to reconnect with other friends or find new friends.
And I think sometimes we even ask ourselves if we need to shrink in order to, to belong, or to even to escape rejection, to shrink ourselves. And I think sometimes that first story we tell ourselves is self-protective, or, self-preservation. But I think the second story we need to tell ourselves is one of comes from a place of more compassion, more self-compassion, and that sort of gets to the self-friending part in my book, which is to really separate, um, the rejection or the feedback from your identity and your worth. That rejection does not define you and who you are, and your worth. And I think sometimes, and this is really difficult, for I say for most people, but I think it's an important practice, is to think about the rejection as information, and to try to understand, and to try to do a little bit of self-reflection, a little bit of self-awareness, and to be able to move then to be able to move forward from that without letting it define you as a person, or you and your capacity to be a friend.
I think the self-reflection piece is really big.
That's data.
Yeah.
That's information, and it's useful, and it's important for it not to let it define you. I mean, we all I mean, you have a podcast about it. We all experience rejection on some level, be it relational or structural or in so many different ways. We can't escape rejection in life.
So you touch on being vulnerable and building friendships in your book. And I think that it's one of the most effective ways to build strong friendships, obviously without like, overloading someone that you just met with deeply personal things. But I think done right, vulnerability allows us to build connections that help us feel seen.
Yeah.
And that's like the greatest gift that my best friend, who I met 10 years ago, or 12, yeah, about 10 years ago, gave me, was that she was incredibly vulnerable, which gave me permission to be vulnerable. And that was like the first friendship that made me feel truly seen. The question that I want to ask is that I feel like it's far less scary to get rejected for the version of ourselves than it is to get rejected for the version of ourselves that truly opened up. If
Mm,
I just conform and say what everyone else seems to be saying, and I don't really reveal much about myself, then if I get
yeah.
rejected, it is less painful than if I truly revealed myself. So, yeah, for people who are maybe scared of showing them full selves in friendship and that vulnerable side of themselves, what advice would you have, or what thoughts do you have there?
Well, I mean, vulnerability gives us depth in our relationships. And I feel like, I made the point earlier that, the risk of staying insular and quiet is greater than being vulnerable and being rejected, in my opinion. I think that if we want depth with people, that vulnerability is essential. If you are vulnerable with someone who doesn't receive that, then I think that friendship may need a different compartment in your life. And that comes back to recalibrating. I mean, that's part of how we take care of ourselves, right? I mean, that's self-friending is really that part of the antidote of feeling rejected, and the messages that we often give ourselves around self-rejecting, right? I mean, because when that happens, even if in subtle ways, where are we, do we start trying to overfunction in order to belong in a relationship or a friendship or with a group, and maybe we're staying quiet just to avoid friction with others, or we don't ask for our needs to be met. We don't ask people to, or have that kind of relationship where we're reciprocating. And when I hear you speak of someone feeling rejected because they've been vulnerable, then that is not a relationship of true reciprocation. And that's part of, that sort of a 3-point approach to recalibrating is, if a relationship is, if you're feeling conflict and friction and tension in a friendship, you can choose not to have a conversation and just to let it go on. Just the way that it is, you've adjusted your expectations. You know that friendship that's just the status of that friendship. Two, if it is important to you, you can do the debrief. You can have the conversation. As awkward and uncomfortable as it may be, sometimes we have to carve out time to have those uncomfortable conversations if we want a friendship to grow to the next level. And most of the time, when those kinds of conversations are held, the relationship and the friendship will grow. If it doesn't, you're back to either number one, just letting it be, or it fades. And then,
Yeah.
the third conversation is I mean, the third approach is just there are irreconcilable differences, and it doesn't feel safe to have the conversation. It feels toxic. It feels unhealthy. It feels harmful. Then those are relationships that can need to be let go of.
Yeah, I completely I love how you outlined this. And I think that the sad thing about, those difficult conversations, the debriefs you cover, is that I have seen friends who've confided in me, kind of friendships ending, is that they don't often do the debrief, where they're not even giving the friendship a chance to get stronger. And
Yeah.
so it ends up being a friendship that kind of dissolves and ends. And to me, that's just so sad, because I'm like, if you had the conversation, yes, there is still a chance that these are
Mhm.
irreparable differences. But there's also
Yeah.
a chance that, being transparent could mean that you guys have misunderstood each other. And
Yes.
I
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, so I love that. Kimberly, this was such a fantastic conversation. For
Thank you.
listeners who want to learn more about you, grab your book, anything else you're up to, could you share a little bit about where they should go and what you're up to?
Yeah, so you can find more information out on drkimberlyhorn.com. My book is on Amazon or wherever you might buy books retail. Local bookstores in many places here in the United States are carrying it. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn at Dr. Kimberly Horn. And
All of this
I just
will
want
be
to say to anybody, if anyone who's feeling lonely or rejected right now, that it doesn't, you're not broken, and you haven't failed. I mean, it's just, again, it's the data. It's your nervous system, asking you for connection. And I think that it's, connection is something that we can build. We can be intentional, we can learn, we can brush up our skills, and we can get better at it. And we all need that. We all need to be better at coming together.
We all need to be better at coming together. It's such a great ending note. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Kimberly. It's been
Yeah.
a fantastic conversation.
Yeah.
And
Thank
all the details will be linked in the show notes to grab Kimberly's book, connect with her on social, and anything else. This was My Rejection Story, hosted by me, Alice Draper.